Well, hello, and welcome to the MilVet Podcast. Your podcast hosts are Brendan Aronson, Tim Shaw, and Beau Higgins. We are military veterans, entrepreneurs, and investors. But most importantly, we strive to empower military service members, veterans, and their families. We believe that all veterans deserve a career that fires them up, a career in which you can learn, you can earn, and you can build a world-class network. On this podcast, we interview civilian and military veteran leaders who are incredible founders, writers, thinkers, and investors. My primary goal is to inspire you to achieve great things. Let's dive into today's episode. Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of the MilVet Podcast. I am your host, Beau Higgins, and I have the pleasure today to be joined by Bryan Vavruska. I'm looking forward to talking to Bryan about his journey from the military to what he's doing now, and we'll get into that. Thanks for tuning in today. For those that may not be familiar with the MilVet basically is an executive platform that facilitates veterans that are interested in getting into the private equity and venture capital world. If that is something of interest to you, I encourage you to check out themilvet.org. You can learn about job opportunities we have. You can check out our history of podcasts. You can check out upcoming events and really learn about opportunities for veterans and maybe want to getting into this, what can be a unique space. And great to have you out there listening. But today we're here with Bryan. And Bryan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Beau. Thanks. Glad to be here.
Let's start off with just give us a quick snapshot. What are you doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess technically my title is Senior Vice President of the Midwest region for Apex Service Partners. We are a collection of home services companies mainly focused in plumbing, electrical, and HVAC services. And I'm out here in Indianapolis, Indiana. All
right. Well, that has got to be an interesting journey from being an infantry officer to doing what you're doing now, and look forward to getting into that. Let's bring it all the way back to the beginning. Obviously, or not obviously to anyone out there, but you were a West Point grad, so you obviously had some type of military influence from back in the day. What got the whole ball rolling for you to want to join the military and do it through West Point?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think like a lot of people that, I'm 40 years old, a lot of people that were my age, 9/11 happened kind of right when you came online, so to say, when you could start to form your own thoughts and really understood the gravity of things like that happened in the world. So I think first and foremost, I was a sophomore in high school and that happened. I think that just starts the ball rolling for a lot of different things in people's lives. And for me, there was a lot of patriotism. There was a lot of the country being galvanized behind defending our country and what that meant for us. So it's really just started there. Like, let's just put that flag down there on that piece. I think it was also secondly, I wanted to play college football. I did play football at West Point. They did recruit me. And that was where I thought my path would take me to some degree. And it gave me a great opportunity to do that. I'm not the smartest person on the face of the planet. I'll happily admit that. And football offered me some opportunities I may not have otherwise had. So I can happily admit that now. And thirdly is, my dad's a 30-year firefighter from outside Chicago, and it's, not an exact, correlation, but it is fairly close to the military and how they operate and how they think. And so there's that kind of, lineage of service, I guess you could say it, in my family. And oddly enough, when I started getting recruiting letters, and I kind of had maybe separated myself from other people in the way I thought about things, and the way I approached work. My dad actually mentioned to me, I think maybe my freshman or sophomore year, would you ever think about going to West Point or the Naval Academy? I didn't really know much about it. And he just said, I just can kind of see something in you where I think you might fit in pretty well there versus maybe a regular college. So all those things sort of happened together. And then I got that recruiting letter from West Point my junior year. And then everything kind of went on hyperdrive at that point. So really just a perfect storm of a lot of different factors there.
No, I think that's a great point. That first off, from your dad and just the service, I say just, giving back, right? Whether you're a first responder, whether you're in the military, you have that sense of purpose that was part of your family, and it's just ingrained inside of you. And obviously, 9/11 adds to that. Obviously, okay, this country, needs me, but you feel that pull, right? You feel that pull to give back. You see it from your family, you see it in the country. And obviously West Point is a great place to do that for sure. I can certainly appreciate the football thing. I went to University of Virginia and walked on out there. I was not very good. I
Yeah.
didn't make it very long, but I did make it for at least a year. So I can appreciate my skills were better served in the fraternity house than they were in the football field. But I think
Yeah, absolutely.
that a sense of teamwork you get from playing football as well as a part of it. I think, and always just want to be part of that team. But
Absolutely.
stuff. And we'll talk about a little bit about your time at West Point. Obviously, went there. I mean, I say primarily for football, but obviously a great education. I assume you visited in the summertime when it was looking great.
Oh yeah, of
Over there in
course.
the winter.
Of course. I'm from Chicago though. I'm used to the winters there. I was used to those at that point.
Fair
So
enough. Fair enough. But what are some of the highlights of your time from West Point that maybe set the baseline for your success, in the future?
yeah, West Point, it's difficult. It's like I said, all kidding aside, I wasn't the 4.0 GPA high school student. I wasn't National Honor Society. I wasn't the captain of every single, school club. In a lot of ways, I likely would not have gotten in there, without football. So with that being said, you kind of have to find ways to bridge those gaps that you might have versus other people at the school. And so for me, I was the epitome of cooperate and graduate, as they say, right? There's not enough time in the day to do everything you need to do when you throw athletics on top of it. And then when I'm trying, you go from living with your parents to now you're playing football, you're taking on one of the heaviest academic loads in the country, you're becoming an adult in many ways, you're on all new people. How do you balance all of that stuff? And that was pretty challenging my first 2 years. So it was you find help where you can get it. You try to make friends with people. You try to ask questions. You try to be humble. But it's all very difficult when you're 18 years old trying to figure all that out, right? So I realized pretty quickly, much like you mentioned earlier, I was not going to the NFL. I realized as soon as I got in the field against Tulane and we saw Matt Forte, who played for the Bears, that was not happening, and we were in the middle of two overseas conflicts, and I kind of had to ask myself what made the most sense for me to focus my time on. And that's when I did step away from football for my first 2 years. And I really dove in to the academics and the military side of things. And that was kind of when I really started to enjoy myself maybe a little bit more there. Again, you start to meet people, your academic load gets a little bit easier at that point. But it was really where I kind of determined that I did enjoy the military, and I was going to kind of really immerse myself in those things. So I did end up going infantry. I wanted to go to Ranger School. I wanted to go overseas. But also at that point, I made a couple of really good friends, and your social freedoms kind of elevate a little bit, and you kind of get to really understand the fun parts of the military, what you can get out of it. So, the first 2 years were really difficult. I didn't know for sure for how long I wanted to be there. And then when I kind of found my place and understood how the system worked, it became a lot more enjoyable to where you feel like you're making progress every day. And even though it's still hard, you feel like what you're doing at least. And that made it a lot better for me.
No, it's definitely. I mean, it's all about finding your path, right?
Yep.
And finding your people. I think that's anywhere you are. You want to find that team. You want to find that camaraderie. And when you find that, obviously it motivates you to stick around and dig in some more and want to be part of that team even going forward. And obviously,
Yeah.
you're able to find your people, find your team, and turn that into success at West Point, and to be an infantry officer, which again is where I think most folks you think of at West Point. That's where they want
That's
to
where you
be.
want to go. Yeah,
That's it, right? That's like in the Marine Corps, right? You want to be an infantry officer. That's what you go there for in a lot of ways.
absolutely.
That's great stuff. Well, talk about that a little bit. About obviously you went into infantry side of the house. Talk about your time in the military and maybe some highlights of that. Obviously, 2007, you're graduating, right? I mean, it's right in the middle of Iraq, Afghanistan. That's
Yep.
when things were the hottest, I would think, as far as deployment cycles. And you jumped right in, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. So infantry and my time there was a lot of fun. I mean, at the very surface level, it's cool to jump out of airplanes. It's cool to aerosol out of helicopters. It's cool to take live bullets and run around, training facilities and fire those things. And all that stuff is really, really cool. And, in 07, 08, my classmates were essentially looking at the deployment calendar and picking their units based on who was going to be deploying quickly. Like, that was what people wanted to do back then. And I'm sure people still do now. I'm not trying to say that that's changed, but this, like you said, was right in the middle of it. And the cycles were pretty quick. So I was fortunate enough to where, I got out of Ranger School and all those infantry basic courses. And I was overseas within 6 weeks. We were in Iraq in 6 weeks. So that to me was outside of all the things I just said, the kind of the next level of that was I got a chance to go deploy, right? And that in itself is fine. People can, jump on an airplane and fly wherever. But the fact that I was able to do it over, with a team of 30 guys on my team was pretty cool. When you look back and you think, I'm 23 years old, given 30 people, in an organization to go lead overseas, it's pretty remarkable, and it's kind of head scratching at times that they trust us to do that. But getting it, when I got in, I wanted to be infantry. I wanted to go to Ranger School. I wanted to deploy. I wanted to do all the things you sign up for to be in the Army, at least from my perspective. That's why I signed up personally. People have different reasons. And so for me, the highlight was being able to live that out. And then secondly, it's the 30 individuals that you get to work with and lead overseas, the variety of experiences they have is crazy. You have 18-year-olds who were just in high school a year ago, and then you have 45-year-olds who have been in for 20 years that know more, who have forgotten more about the military than I ever would know. And then you're tasked with somehow galvanizing that group to listen to you and to work with you, and that's a pretty unique leadership experience that I'm not really sure you can get anywhere else outside of a military unit or a police force unit or a fire department, things like that. So for me, that was the real highlight. And I think that is, as I'm sure we'll get into, is what has led me to kind of the role I'm in right now, and what I think has made my current organization pretty successful. Because that's just it's just a unique experience to understand, to be dynamic in that way, and to be humble, like I said earlier, but also to be decisive. And it's a very unique balance. And I think the infantry provided that to me very, very well.
Yeah, it is such a unique experience. Again, I don't think people can appreciate that enough, what you said. I mean, at age 23, 24, you're responsible for 30 people, $1 million of equipment. I mean, there's no other job in the world where that happens, where they trust, again,
right.
Again, I think myself, a knucklehead in college, and all of a sudden, I mean, you're it, man. You're the lieutenant in charge. I mean, again, and you're right. It is such a melting pot of America in the military, right? I love that part of it too, from age differences, from folks from, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, down South, but it's all around a single purpose, and to be able to strip away everything else that your background is, and to galvanize around the mission and the training. It's something special about that. Something special about building that team, watching them grow, and to just where you can just have these, almost unspoken commands and connections and just get things done. There's something special about that. And again, I think it's the only place I can think you have that really is in the military, especially at that age. It is just such a unique experience that does, and we'll talk about this more, certainly translate into the civilian sector. I think that people don't understand that a lot of times. Maybe companies don't appreciate that a lot of times, of what a veteran brings to the table. It's like, oh, he was infantry. He can blow things up. He's good at being homeless. Why would I want to hire that guy? It's like, well,
right.
There's 1,000 reasons you want to hire this guy. I mean, and we'll talk about that. But I think it's underappreciated, the experience you get, the level of responsibility you have at a very, very young age to be responsible for these people's lives, and you're the one making those calls at the end of the day. And it can be a little lonely too sometimes doing that. That's leadership, right? That's taking care of your people, putting them in the place they're supposed to be, and bringing them together as a team. And it's a special thing for sure, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I think you always have the one common thing is that you're all those 30 individuals that have different backgrounds and all that stuff. At the end of the day, you're all there, whether it's overseas or at PT, or you always have that one thing in common. And I think because they're the connection, that's all voluntary, the connection that all those people have to, well, we are here together, provides the foundation, and, with the right people to really take that team to the next level. I think that's really exciting to know that you can be the fuel on that fire for some of these individuals, and same to you. They can bring something out of you that you didn't know existed. I learned a lot from my teams. Hopefully they learned a little bit from me. But at the end of the day, that foundation of, look, we're all here voluntarily to do something great and defend the country. That's a pretty tight barrier that it creates amongst your team, for sure.
No doubt about it. I mean, that teamwork, and you can never find it again either. I mean, especially when you're deployed, there's something
right.
About the unique bond of being deployed, and all you have is a guy on your left and the right. You're not going back home at night. It's you got each other, and you better figure it out, because there's nobody else coming. The reserves ain't coming to help you out, right?
Absolutely.
How many deployments did you end up doing?
So I did 12 months to Southern Iraq in '08 to '09, and then I did another, I think, 4 or 5 months in 2010 before I came back.
Got it. Got it. And what was, I mean, obviously, any highlights of that time being deployed in particular? One thing you want to talk about, one special memory or something you kind of take away from that?
You know, there's not necessarily a certain memory. I mean, the best stuff was just getting back off a mission and having a rip it with the guys, or throwing a dip in. My mom can cover her ears. Throwing a dip in with the guys after the mission, just sitting around and a cup of coffee and shooting the breeze with them. Um, you know, it's pretty repetitive days at times, and some days are certainly worse than others. But the worst days, those aren't necessarily highlights. The highlights is when things are calm and you're just enjoying the time with the team and appreciating. And in my opinion, that's the time when kind of the leadership shows itself. If someone's, people are going to fight next to you. They have to fight. Everyone's fighting in a lot of ways, right? It's when they don't have to spend time with you and tell you how they're thinking about something, or showing you their vulnerabilities. That's when I think you really kind of see the impact you can have on people in a lot of ways. So those were the times where I used to sit back and say, okay, I've made a connection here with this individual, or they've made a connection with me. And those are the times I reflect back on and said, those are really, really special moments.
Yeah, it's the locker room, right, or the team
Yep.
room, or in the gallows humor you have just to get by. It is a unique experience, and I 100% agree. Sitting there with a non-alcoholic beer and a cigar,
Yeah.
whatever you have at the.
That's what you have. Yep. That's it.
But it seems awesome, man. There's nothing that you can replace that with, and again, getting to know the guys on a personal level, right? Because you're right. There's a surface level, but when you go through those experiences, there's something about being able to share that information and know that guy has got you 100% when he gets to know you a little more. It's something special.
Yep.
It's a unique bond. It says that, especially when you're over in combat. There's nothing that can replace that, I think. In the world.
Yeah, absolutely. No question.
Oh, and obviously you did a couple of deployments and decided to get out. Or what was kind of your thought process on that? I mean, did you kind of figure you had done what you wanted to do? Was there a decision point on? I mean, what was kind of your thinking on your transition from after that? Those initial kind of infantry days.
Yeah. So I wish I could say it was because I felt like I had done everything I wanted to do. The truth is that I didn't necessarily feel that way. There were a couple of paths in the military that I felt I would need to do to make me really happy. Kind of going back to, West Point, what I did learn at West Point as well is that I like to do really hard things, and I like to challenge myself and immerse myself in those things and see how I can do. Can I do it? Is it possible for me to do this? And I wanted to do those things once I got into the military. Those are a very difficult paths to get into, and the randomness of life and other things sometimes don't allow those things to happen. And the window for me, for what I felt, for the window for those paths to work out didn't quite line up. So I'd wanted to get and take my career to the next level, and again, immerse myself in very challenging things. And when I realized that wasn't going to happen, I'd said, you know what, I probably won't be happy doing what I'm currently doing 3, 4, 5 years from now. So maybe to your point, I did everything I wanted to do with what I was able to in the environment I was in. And I just was not going to be able to take that next step for a number of different reasons. So at that point, I decided to go ahead and transition out.
And what was your transition like? Did you have a plan of what you wanted to do? I assume you didn't know that you would be where you are today when you were sitting back getting ready to transition, but what were you thinking? What was your transition like, or what did you envision doing next, if at all? Yeah.
Yeah. It was not easy. I think I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I knew a couple things. I knew, one, I wanted to get back home to Chicago and work out of Chicago. Again, that was really important to me. I did not want to end up in, Ocala, Florida, managing a warehouse, like you see a lot of these transitionary programs do, and you kind of can get put in these very random spots. And I wanted to get home to Chicago, and I wanted to start the path towards some level of financial success post-military. I knew the value I could bring. I knew my experience, I knew what I could become, and I just wanted to make sure that that was appreciated and valued. And some places love the military background, some don't. So that was what was important to me. I did find a way back to Chicago. And what I kind of realized is it matters where you work. The people matter, the type of company matters. And I worked for big companies that I found to be pretty boring. I was a cog in a machine. I could have fallen off the face of the planet, and that operation would have ran because it's a 100-year-old business, and the management doesn't really quite have the impact that I'd like to make. And then I also worked at startups and smaller companies that were really fun and really exciting. But then you realize there's a ton of risks there. You don't have a ton of control over what that next step is and where you might be a year or two from now. And some of those businesses just completely fell off the face of the planet. And that's unfortunate too. So I was definitely not the person that, gets out of the military, goes to their MBA, goes into consulting, and then they're on that very clear next step path. But I did at some point, I realized, okay, these things aren't quite matching up. Where's the gap on my end? How can I help close this gap to give myself a little more certainty and understand more about myself and how to create that path for myself? So I did start my MBA. I went to Kellogg up in Chicago. I finished up my MBA, and then I decided, I'm going to go into consulting. I'm going to do 2 years of something that's challenging to me. It's going to help me learn. It's going to help me kind of get back to neutral, meet a lot of people, understand what my skill sets are, and understand what my where my interests lie. And that was when consulting is where I really started to kind of get my footing, kind of going back to West Point, kind of find my path and find my people and find where I was really going to fit in. So that's where I think it started to work. But by no means was it easy, which is why I love where I work now, because we have a lot of people that come in right out of the military or right out of their MBA, and it's not an easy path. And I think we provide a really good one. And this is where when I got over to Apex after consulting, it's home now. It's really is where I fit in the best. And we have a lot of veterans, as I'm sure we'll talk about, but it was a long path. It was definitely a harder path than other people I've seen take, for sure. And that's probably a lot to do with me, what I had to learn about myself, and that's okay.
Yeah, a few things. First off, everyone on the show, it's never a direct line. There's always
Right.
one door closes, you figure, because that door closes, you pivot to here, and it's, you're always learning from, not think learning from mistakes or failures, but just you're always gathering more information to help your decision process to get to the next step. But I thought you said something that was, I think, very important for folks. It's important in the transition to figure out, as maybe even more so, what you don't want to do as it is what you do want to do, and when you can narrow your shot group down. I know I want to be in Chicago. I know I don't want to be behind a desk. I know what I don't want to do. That really is important, because that helps you figure out what you do want to do. And you also hit on another super important point. I think veterans can get jobs. They're qualified for a lot of different jobs, right? But the culture of the place matters, because when you come from the military, you have a very distinct culture. And again, the Army and the Rangers have their own culture. The Marine Corps does, Navy, they kind of have their own cultures. But there's a culture there that you like, that you bought into. And if you get to a place and the culture just isn't right, you know it and you feel it. You miss that give back factor, that connection, that team. And if you don't have that, if it's missing, I think that's why when I talk to transitioning veterans, which I do a lot, it's like, hey, don't just take a job because you might be miserable there. Find somewhere where you can believe in what you're doing, and there's going to be growth and there's going to be opportunities. If you take a job, you're likely not going to be there more than a year, and you're going to be complaining. And so spend the time up front figuring out what you do want to do, figuring out what you don't want to do, and if you have the ability, dig into the culture piece. That's why you're going to stay somewhere. It's the culture.
Sure.
It's not the job itself a lot of time. The job can be, I think, again, you can do the job a lot of places, but if you have the job and the culture, that's going to be obviously, a recipe for success. And obviously, the other thing I would say that you highlighted that's important, hey, you realized you had some gaps, right?
Yeah.
You got out into the civilian sector. You realize, okay, if I want to get to where I want to go, I need to get my MBA. I'm going to go learn. I think that the fact that you were open for identifying or, self-reflection on, okay, I have some shortfalls here. I need to be able to talk the talk. The MBA is going to give me that. I'm going to go into consulting because I want to learn. As much as it is, I don't think you probably were dying to be a consultant. And of it, but it's like, I want to go learn from that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take those tools, put in my tool chest to help me get to where I actually want to be, which is great. I think that's important to understand that, a lot of people maybe can't admit that they have shortfalls or don't want to say, but to be able to be self-reflective and say, okay, I see where I'm at. I see where I want to go. If I'm going to close those gaps, I need to do these things. And I think you did a good job of doing that and having at least somewhat of a plan. Again, it never works exactly in a straight line, but it sounds like you did at least have an idea of what you needed to get where you wanted to go. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think, honestly, it took me probably a little longer to get to that point. I think the things that I wanted post-military, they were immediate gratification. I want to be in Chicago, as opposed to what can I do next that will allow me to be in Chicago for the long term, right? So I think it's really important when people transition. And a good friend of mine once said this to me is, when I was switching after my first job, is how does your next job help you get the job you want long term? If you're not thinking that way, then you're missing a huge step, because then you're going to be playing whack-a-mole, right? You're going to be trying to satisfy all these different things that you want, financial, location, whatever that might be, but you're not actually creating a path and a foundation for long-term success. And so, yeah, I think it's fair that I think consulting and getting my MBA did that for me. Consulting gets a bad rap. I think if approached with the right mentality, it can be incredibly valuable to transitioning veterans. And I think it's really important too. The last thing I would add on it is, what I learned quickly is people like you for your military leadership, not because of the way you lead in the military. They're expecting you to take that transition and understand you're not in the military, but you know how to lead people. How do you turn that into leadership in a corporate environment, in a boardroom, right? Or whatever that might be. And I think that was where I think I had to learn that difference. And why I think maybe I bounced around a little bit earlier on. And that was one of the gaps I think consulting actually, and then my MBA kind of really taught me. You're around really good leaders. They're not military leaders, but they're in very, very difficult leadership environments. Consulting, you're walking into a business trying to tell someone that's probably been trying to solve this problem for the last 2 years how to solve it. Like, how do you communicate that? How do you lead that person who has no responsibility to listen to you? And I think being able to make that transition is huge for transitioning veterans.
No, a couple things I would say. It's I always talk about leadership as adding tools to your toolbox always, right?
Yeah.
I think in the military, especially lieutenant, you have one tool. It could be a knife hand, it could be a hammer.
Yep.
But as you get more senior, you need to have the right tool for the right job, right? You need a screwdriver, you need a wrench, you need this. Different people need to be led different ways, and you have to have a leadership style that can appreciate that, because again, they're not going to adapt to you. You need to adapt to the situation and bring the right tool to be the leader for that spot. And I think you see it sometimes in veterans that say, well, it worked for me in the military, I'm going to keep leading this way. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I saw it in my time at Amazon. I saw a lot of guys that were knife handing guys in the warehouse. Like, that's probably not going to work.
Doesn't always work.
No,
that's a good.
To them, they're not going to adapt to you. Right? They're
absolutely
successful for a reason. You have to figure out what works in that place, and again, be willing to add more tools in the toolbox to be a successful leader. And take, to your point, learn from those mentors, those people that are being successful. Say, okay, that's something. That's something I never want to do again as a leader, which is probably even more important. But that's something that I do want to do, and I want to be able to add that tool. So when that problem arises for me in the future, I can address it. I can deal with it in the right leadership style, which is super important.
Yeah, spot on.
The other thing I would say too that you hit on a little bit and didn't maybe flesh out a little more is that the power of the network you got from your MBA and from consulting as well. I mean, it sounds like that's something that I don't know if people think about that as much as they maybe should, but in reality, typically the job you are going to get is from your network. I mean, again, you can apply online all day and obviously having an MBA from Kellogg is great, but the network, the people are typically what is going to facilitate you getting to where you want to go. I mean, and obviously that you were able to leverage that and use that piece too to help you be successful. Is that fair?
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. And I'll tell a little anecdote real quick here, Beau, is when I had determined I wanted to go into consulting, that was the next best step for me. I basically stopped working. I was like, I'm going to case study prep every single day. I'm just going to work on getting to case study prep for this interview process for consulting. And I'm going to hit up every single person I can find in my network that works for a consulting firm and have coffee. And I probably had 50 phone calls with people or coffee chats with people across my entire network. Even I remember my basic training, what we call Beast at West Point. My first platoon leader there was a consultant. I even hit him up, and I hadn't talked to the guy. I hadn't seen the guy in a while. So, but what's funny is that I was at the gym in Chicago after going through all this process of trying to find a way into some consulting firm, and I hear someone call my name from behind me at this gym, and it was a fellow West Point grad who actually had shadowed me when I was a second lieutenant, and I hadn't seen him in forever. I asked him what he's up to, and he says he works for Accenture. And within a week, I was interviewing with Accenture strategy, and that's where I ended up going. So someone that, obviously remembered me and I remembered him, and we had a decent relationship, came back several years later and put me on a path to where I'm at today. So those networks matter. I don't think we let military, transitioning veterans understand the strength of their military network quite enough, especially the service academies, especially. I mean, I think we all appreciate that network, but it's a huge value add, something that should be tapped into pretty frequently.
No, you're spot on with that. And again, it's funny how that story worked for you to get your job. But I do appreciate the fact that you were willing to go out there and talk to people. I mean, again, there's a great TED Talk on 50 Cups of Coffee. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I was transitioning, and reaching out to, friends from college, friends from high school, family members that I had kind of, I say lost touch, but they knew I was in the military, and I'm getting out, and you're trying to plug back into the real world for 25 years, and
Yeah.
they've been supportive of you from afar, but you really haven't talked to them about, what's next. And they were all, I would say this, I was very impressed that people were always willing to give me some time just to ask them questions. I mean, I remember talking to my buddies that were like in commercial real estate. I'm like, all right, you sell buildings. Well, what the hell does that mean? I mean, what do you do? What do you actually do? Like, what is it? I don't know. But, sounds like you're doing well, but like, is that for me? Just having those, and to figure out what you don't want to do as much as what you do want to do, but using your network to be able to shape that, pare that down. And you obviously, were able to do that and get into the consulting side of it and then leverage that into the next opportunity. And obviously, I think you had that in mind when you joined the consulting side, right?
Right.
You were already kind of using that as a stepping stone to your point before of where you hope to be in the future, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And timing worked out. A lot of things had to go right, but timing worked out. And I like to think that all the hard work and planning kind of, the good luck, the preparation and timing kind of works out the right way. So yeah, it's worked out well.
You make your own luck. I believe hard work helps you make your own luck. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about the next step then. Obviously, you finish up the consulting piece, and how'd you get to where you are now? How'd that happen?
Yeah. Again, it's pretty crazy. When I was in consulting, I'd gotten a call from a company about, running a financial portfolio or something in Chicago. And I said, thank you for the interest. I'm very flattered. Nothing about my background says I would be any good at that. I'm not a finance guy. And it was weird because I felt the need to respond to this, kind of going back to building your network. I was learning, like, look, respond to these emails. Like this is someone that who knows where we're all going to be 2 years from now. So I said, I'm going to respond back to this. And I did like consulting, so I wasn't necessarily even looking. And I said, but I'm in Indianapolis now. I'm no longer in Chicago. If you have something operational, let me know. And 6 months later, I got another call or email from that individual that said, hey, we just bought an HVAC company in Plainfield, Indiana. Do you want to come on our team and run it for us? So, I've got a couple of really good friends in the private equity world. And this is who have, kind of been along the same lines. But, this was something very different where it's look, we want to create a really great team and great culture here. And we want you to help us do that from the ground up. So I talked to some other friends and they said, Bryan, that's a dream job. And not only is it a dream job, but you're the perfect guy to go do that and be successful. So we hopped off, hopped off that call, and I called her back and I said, yeah, let's definitely talk about that. So I joined Apex at that point. I was the general manager of a $6 million HVAC business in Plainfield, Indiana, not where I thought I would be. From there, Apex has really taken off. We hire a lot of veterans. We're about 65% veteran led at this point. A lot of us are referrals. We have a group of about 7 executives here in the Midwest, and 4 of them are West Point grads. One's a Marine, one's a non-West Point SF guy. With that kind of network, it's been great because we all support each other, and we really work in an environment where I think we value what we do. We value the technicians and the people that we work with. And because of the culture we've built and the team that we've built around us, we've been able to grow incredibly fast. And the way Apex works is when you perform, you get more and more responsibility. When you're growing quickly, there's a lot of responsibility to be had. So I've been fortunate enough, I was the general manager of that $6 million business. We grew that due to a lot of different reasons, most not to do with me, most to do with the team and the environment I was operating in. And then now we have some things in Michigan, and now we have some work in Ohio that needs to be done. And so I took over I moved up as the market president for Indiana and then for Michigan. And, the last 20 months or so, my boss, had said, "Hey, Bryan, we're growing so quick. I need some help up here in the regional team. And would you come up here and work with me and help me support the region?" So I've been doing that now for the last about 20-ish to 24 months. And it's been great. You get to see all parts of the business. You get to see the recruiting side and the marketing and the FP&A and all the support functions and this great part of the organization like that. But I also get to work with the operators and support them. But most importantly, I think we do things I know we do things the right way. And going back to kind of the military, you have these 18-year-old, 20-year-old, 23-year-old technicians who are just trying to find their way. And we have a chance to come in and really improve their lives through how we run these businesses with integrity, and we try to make everything great for the technicians and the customers. And I think the fact that we do that the right way is what has allowed us to grow really well, and what's allowed us to develop really strong leaders, and why people like me continue to stay here.
And I have to believe, again, just from an outsider's lens, HVAC itself doesn't sound very sexy necessarily.
Right.
And I assume you had no experience in HVAC per se when you were getting into it. What do you attribute your success to? Like, for someone that is, like you, that is in this journey right now, just transitioning out, maybe getting their MBA. What would you say was really the key to you being successful in that role? I assume it's the leadership piece, but is there anything that you can say that, my military time really, what are those intangibles maybe that have been, helped you be successful, especially when you first got there into a field that seems a little foreign and maybe a little weird initially, but what helped you be successful?
Yeah, I think it's, we have a term we use about, how big is your frying pan? Like what limits do you put? And that comes from a kind of weird anecdote, but what it really means is what limits are you putting on yourself to go do, right? And I think as long as you're aware of what your limitations are, but also don't limit yourself, I think that's really important. What I mean by that is I knew I didn't know anything about HVAC, right? So you have to have the humility to understand, what can I beg, borrow, and steal from everyone around me that's done this really, really well. And I think what allowed me to do that is I asked a lot of questions. I dug into all those things, and I didn't necessarily try to reinvent the wheel in anything I did. Apex got here with a really, really strong plan for how we want to run these businesses. And I tried to execute on that as well as I possibly could. The second piece is you still have to be decisive. And I think that's one of the pieces I pulled from the military is when decisions need to be made, you need to galvanize support, and you need to do them very, very quickly. These businesses can be fragile. The people all have lives. They depend on us to put them in a position to be successful. And if we're, going slow and doing this and doesn't work, and we don't really know, let's wait and see if it works better next month. That just doesn't fly for people. They want someone that's going to make decisions to improve their lives and take care of customers. And, so that's the second kind of piece of it is to be decisive and move with pace. And then the last thing I'll touch on the leadership is, and this is why I think veterans do so well in a business like Apex, is because a group of technicians, if you put them on paper, look a lot like a group of soldiers. They come from all backgrounds. They are incredibly intelligent people. They can rip apart a furnace and put it back together blindfolded, right? These guys are smart people, smart guys and girls. But they're nothing like me. Like, we all have different backgrounds, and how do you relate to someone like that and come in and say, hey, we're going to do X, Y, or Z. We hope we know it's going to work. Put your trust in us. and have that relatable conversation with them, and then turn around and talk to a business executive about the performance of your business. Like that, there's a dual hatedness there that I think veterans have showed up really well with at Apex. And I think it's what's made me successful. I think it's what makes a lot of the veterans successful at Apex.
No, I love that, and I think that's the key of what a veteran brings to the table. If you add your veteran experience with the MBA and with real world experience, you have the ability to lead down. That's what you did in the military, right? You took care of your people, and the analogy I always used to make is, as the leader, I'm the offensive lineman. I'm blocking, opening the hole so you can be successful in your mission. What can I do to eliminate the friction? Whether that's making a
Right.
decision, giving you the resources, and I'm out of the way, and you're scoring a touchdown. But let me go out there and be the blocker to open that hole for you. And again, I think that's the mindset we have a lot of times in the military. But I think the other piece that you're talking about is you can lead up, right? You're not only you
Right.
can lead down, which again, maybe a lot of people don't have that experience. Certainly, again, any Stanford MBA, great, that's a beautiful thing. But if you've never led anybody, I'd rather have a guy that has a leadership plus. That's the
Yeah.
beauty of what the veteran brings to the table is that leadership piece, those intangibles of being able to lead down, but also then be able to put on the coat and tie and talk to the board, right? I mean, that's not an easy thing. That's not something that people have the opportunity to do. But in the military, you do that all the time. You're talking to your bosses and you're briefing them, but you're also taking care of your people and you're leading down, and to bring that together and be able to then translate that into the operational world is a unique thing. What would you say on the PE side in particular is different about again, a lot of folks get out. I mean, I worked at Amazon for 7 years. We hired a lot of veterans, and they still do there. It's a different world though in the PE side of the house. So for folks that want to get into this type of a space, should people know about getting into jobs like yours, especially your entry level role? What's the difference that you would have there maybe than in the big corporate America?
Yeah. Um, well, I'll first say, Beau, is that I think if you ask a lot of people at Apex, we don't even like the word PE. I think we operate very differently than that. I think, and look, there's a lot of very successful, PE companies, and that's fine. We're at a size where we do things a certain way where we get left alone, and we run this business like it's what it is, which is a group of home services platforms and a great team that tries to improve the lives of our employees and our customers and our clients. Right. So, um, you know, with that being said, I think we also operate differently in a way that there aren't necessarily set paths where you say you do this, and you do that, and then you can come work for us. There's very clear paths of MBA to this, to internship, to where if you want to come work at X, Y, or Z consulting or banking firm or this private equity firm. We're not deal guys. We're not finance guys here. Like despite what you might hear about, or when you hear private equity, we're a bunch of veteran operators that want to go make a great business. So with that being said, for the advice for people that want to get into spaces like Apex, I've said this before on a different forum, is you got to find a place that you like to work. There's a lot of companies out there that are trying to recruit veterans. I like to think Apex has set a new standard for this profile of individual. Like with my background and a lot of my colleagues, they're all going to come looking for you. They're all going to want your background, especially if you go get an MBA or do a couple of years in regular jobs. Not every business does it the right way. And I've seen that before. And I think we've seen it across our industry. You really got to vet who you're going to go work for, because back to our previous discussion, if the culture's not right, not good for you, not good for your team, not good for the business, and you'll be looking for something else a year or two later. So I certainly would say to make sure you fully understand what kind of business you want to work for. And the second is I would just talk to as many people as possible and use that network. As people continue to search for people with, our type backgrounds, they're going to get harder and harder to find. It's going to get harder and harder to find spots. And if you're not tied in and people can't vouch for you and say, I know that Bryan or I know that Beau is going to come in here and do a good job, there's a lot of risk in pulling someone right out of an MBA or right out of the military. There's a lot of risk. There is a risk of the transition is real. I mean, it does take time. And if someone's not able to vouch for you and you don't have those people watching over you and supporting you and help develop you, and you're not asking someone to ask questions to, that learning curve can shift quite a bit. So those are the things I would say are really, really important, to really vet the businesses and then use your network to get yourself in a position where you can really develop and grow quickly.
That's great advice. I mean, it just reemphasized what we talked about, right? The network is so important because someone vouching for you, especially in the PE space, it's a smaller subset of the bigger workspace. You got to have that. I mean, having that warm intro, got to have it, but 95% of the time, it's somebody that is going to be vouching for you. So having that network is huge. But then the culture, I mean, again, and you've obviously created a culture there that allows veterans to be successful, or is built based on what veterans bring to the table. And you understand that and empower them to be successful because of what they bring to the table. I mean, again, understanding that is, more than just a piece of paper of a resume, the intangibles, I think, of what a veteran can bring to the table with the right culture is huge. And I love that.
Yeah. What I would say, real Beau, just one more quick thing is I don't want anyone to get the impression that if you don't know someone at a business like Apex, you can't get in. That's not the case at all. But it also when someone says, I talk to 5 or 6 people at Apex before they get to me, that's someone I know that wants to be here. And that's someone I know that has the fire and the drive. And then I can then go say, hey, what did you guys talk about with this individual? And like, it's just a really positive data point. It's not it's not a deal breaker if not, but that's just a major win for a candidate like that.
Sure. No, that's a great point. I don't mean to say you have to know somebody, but again, it's
right.
Showing the grit, because you're going to have to get through that grit, that ability to work through chaos, because it's going to be days where it's just putting your head down and pushing through that veterans are used to. Other people may not be used to. You hit that wall and just keep on. You have to believe in yourself. You're taking a chance on yourself in a lot of ways. And if you believe in you and you can push through it, you can be successful 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and obviously you started off as running one facility, and were able to progress to more senior leadership roles at Apex. What have you had to do to continue your progression? What have, as you're continued to grow, what tools have you added to your own toolbox to keep you, I say, current or successful instead of being stagnant? What do you think what do you attribute that to? What have you been able to do to continue to grow, inside the company?
Yeah. There's a couple of things I would attribute that to. Actually, it's funny you use the word relevance. I think the way to move up a lot of times is to make yourself irrelevant, to build a team as such that functions so highly that you can step away to go do something else, and everyone believes that business will continue to operate. That to me, when I always laugh when people say, if I leave this business, it's going to fall apart. Well, to me, that means you haven't really built anything. That's actually not a great thing not a great compliment for you, to be honest. So I really try to find really great leaders. And I found them really by luck, because a lot of them are already in the organization or were brought into the organization, build a team that understood what we were trying to accomplish, and then give them the tools to hopefully be successful and go do that, so that I could then step back and take on more responsibility. So that is really the main thing I would say operationally I try to focus on in order to allow myself to take on more work and more responsibility. The second thing I would say, and this kind of goes back to this self-reflection, is I work with a lot of really, really smart people. And despite any movement upwards in the organization, people have really good ideas, and they know what they want to do, and they have seen things be successful that I was not around for. Maybe I just haven't had that experience. And what I've continued to have to challenge myself to do is to continue to ask questions and not come in with predetermined ideas of what something should look like or be because it worked for me. And that's just not the way to galvanize a team, to gain followership, or to collaborate, really. So that's just a really new approach from the military that I think had to work through at times, which is, I've seen this work. Let's do it this way. Let's go. Let's move quickly. And, you sometimes you have to slow down to move fast, especially when, again, like I said, when you work with really smart people who are smarter than me in a lot of ways. And it's actually not only doing them a disservice by maybe not hearing what their experiences are, but it's doing me a disservice too, because they see things I don't. And I think just kind of getting used to that constant back and forth and feedback loop, improving on that and making sure that was always a part of my process has allowed me to take some steps as well.
And that is great advice. And again, I think it's one of the hardest things when, again, you're in a leadership spot, maybe you want to make decisions fast in certain cases,
Right.
but be willing to listen to the people that are doing it every day, and if
Yeah.
you lose touch with if you lose touch with them, you're screwed, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
gotta and again, at the end of the day, the decision is still yours, but at least listen to what they have to say and be open to tweaking it, saying, you know what, I don't have all the answers here. You're right, you're doing it. All right, maybe we're not going to do it exactly the way you said it, but I'm going to take a little bit of what I know and what you're adding to it, and we'll find the right path to make this happen. I think that's just that whole feedback loop, which turns in I call it the OODA loop always. How do you get into that OODA loop of observe, orient, decide, act? But
Right.
part of that is the feedback of it, and to get ahead of the enemy or the cycle and get ahead of that, you can do that and do it well, and have mechanisms in place where that feedback is able to be injected, and they know they can provide it. That just empowering your team. That's what you're doing.
Yeah,
right? You're
absolutely.
empowering your team to feel like they have a voice. Whether you always do what they say or not is not the point, but they know they have a voice and they're being heard is huge. And it sounds like
Absolutely.
you've been able to do. And I love your point of always trying to work yourself out of a job. I always said the same thing. I mean, like anyone that leaves the Marine Corps or the Army, they're going to be fine without us. There's guys that leave. I'm going to work for the last day of my 30th year, and dude, they'll be just fine without you. I hate to tell you,
Yeah.
they're going to be
Yeah.
fine. So you have to have that idea of, if I can work myself out of a job, which then enables me and opens up my aperture to do bigger and better things. That's awesome, and it's great that
Absolutely.
Apex allows you to do that. And seeing that you've been able to work yourself out of a job by making something so efficient, they didn't, your time was better spent looking upward and doing bigger things, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's the future hold for you? And what's you've been there how long now at Apex?
Yeah, just over 4 years. It's been pretty wild.
That's awesome. That is great, and a great, again, great to see just the continued success for you. If we come back to you in 3 years, what does success look like for Bryan? In a few years from now.
Yeah, I mean, most of my success is rooted in the success of those around me, right? I think timing worked out really well. I got linked in with some really awesome people here at Apex, and we've grown at a pace that's really not been seen in this industry. So success for me looks like everyone around me continues to do well, and through my support, hopefully in some way, and them supporting me and giving me, me learning a lot from them, and that we continue on this train that we're on. The reason we don't like the dirty PE word as well is because we have no intention of going anywhere. This is not some kind of 3-year exit. I mean, we want to build the greatest platform for what we do in the country. I think we've already done that, but we want to make it even better, and we want to continue to improve the lives of everyone on this team. And that doesn't happen. That the horizon of that happening is not in my purview right now. That is a long standing goal that's going to be here for a while. And if I wake up 3 years from now and we're twice the size that we are now, and we're on the same path, I think that's what success would look like for me. So it's a pretty exciting time, and we just need to keep bringing in great people, and then I think we'll keep going.
I love it. That the rising tide lifts all boats, right? So
absolutely,
and the whole company benefits from that. That's great stuff. Well, this has been awesome. And I guess as we get ready to wrap up, and what would you say to anyone, to those transitioning veterans, maybe guys that are getting their MBA right now, or thinking about getting into the operations space, kind of more generally speaking, what advice would you have for them for wanting to join a company like Apex?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people can be successful. It doesn't take one certain background to go be successful at a company like Apex. I think it's really important to be very aware of what your strengths and weaknesses are, what your gaps are, and what you can bring, and just try to fill those gaps as well as you can. If you think you can come to a business and you think you have the prerequisite knowledge and ability, run that past some other people that may be a mentor to see if they would agree, and really kind of do a full 360 analysis of of who you are, and don't go for that big job that you think you want long term until you feel like you're pretty close there. You don't really get a lot of chances at really cool long term jobs, and when you show up on that day, you want to be ready for it. So do the work on yourself that you need to do to prep yourself for that long-term job. Be super humble and self-aware. And then when you feel like you're ready, and you just go for it and find that, and make sure you leverage that network that you've been building over those years. It's super useful. But it really comes down to working on yourself and making sure that you're really ready to go when the time comes.
I love it, man. You never know your name's be called, so be ready when it is, right?
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Hey, Bryan, I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate your insights. I am confident it'll be helpful for folks listening to the podcast. And I hope our paths cross in the near future, and we'll go from there. Thanks again for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Beau, it's been great. Really appreciate you having me on. And thanks so much.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. For more content, follow us on Instagram @TheMilitaryVet or on LinkedIn. Join us at an upcoming event or learn more on our website, themilvet.org. Feel free to email us directly at leadership@themilvet.org. Thank you so much and take care.